A flight attendant removed a young black boy from the plane, assuming he didn't belong in first class. Little did she know that moments later, he would reveal himself as the owner of the airline. What happens next will leave you astonished and impart a significant lesson about judgment and assumptions. Watch until the end to see how this remarkable story unfolds. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share in the comments where you're watching from. The bustling terminal of JFK International Airport in New York was vibrant with the sounds of flight announcements, rolling luggage, and hurried footsteps. Among the crowd was Caleb Turner, a 12-year-old black boy with wide, curious eyes and an air of quiet confidence. Caleb wore a simple hoodie and jeans, carrying a backpack filled with books and snacks for his journey. He was flying solo for the first time, heading to Washington, D.C. to meet his father, Jonathan Turner, the CEO of Airline, one of the largest carriers in the nation. Despite being the son of an airline mogul, Caleb had always been taught to value humility and respect. He presented his first-class ticket to the gate agent, who smiled warmly and directed him toward the jet bridge. Caleb found his seat 2A at the front of the plane, placed his backpack neatly under the seat, and pulled out a book about aviation. He had inherited his father's passion for planes and was deeply engrossed in learning everything about them. As Caleb settled in, Melissa Porter, the flight attendant, walked briskly down the aisle. Melissa, a 35-year-old with a no-nonsense demeanor, prided herself on maintaining order. Her sharp gaze landed on Caleb, and her expression immediately soured. "Excuse me," Melissa said, her tone clipped. "Are you sure you're in the right seat?" Caleb looked up, confused but polite. "Yes, ma'am, this is my seat, 2A. Melissa frowned, her eyes narrowing. "First class isn't for standby passengers or upgrades. This section is reserved for paying customers." Caleb blinked, startled by her assumption. "I have a ticket," he said, reaching into his pocket to show her, but Melissa didn't bother to look. "You need to move to the back," she said firmly. "I can't have people sitting where they don't belong." The interaction caught the attention of a few nearby passengers who exchanged puzzled glances but said nothing. Caleb hesitated, his cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "I really do have a ticket," he repeated, his voice quieter now. Melissa sighed impatiently. "Look, I don't have time for this. Either you move or I'll have to ask you to leave the plane." Tears welled in Caleb's eyes, but he held his head high. "Fine," he said softly, grabbing his backpack and walking back down the aisle. He stood near the exit, unsure of what to do next, as Melissa radioed the gate agents. "Remove this child," she told them curtly. The gate agent approached, confused. "He's a ticketed passenger," she said, but Melissa dismissed her with a wave. "Carriage." Caleb quietly stepped off the plane, standing near the gate, as other passengers whispered among themselves. As Caleb stood awkwardly in the terminal, trying to hold back tears, Emily Harris, the terminal manager, noticed him. Emily was a sharp-eyed, compassionate professional who had worked closely with Caleb's father, Jonathan Turner, on various airline initiatives. She recognized Caleb immediately. "Caleb, what are you doing here?" she asked, walking over. Caleb explained what had happened, his voice trembling. "She didn't even look at my ticket. She just assumed I wasn't supposed to be there." Emily's face hardened with anger. "Stay right here," she said, pulling out her phone. Moments later, she was on a call with Jonathan Turner. "Jonathan, your son was just removed from one of your flights." "Yes, removed. He's standing here in tears because one of your employees assumed he didn't belong in first class." Jonathan's voice was sharp and decisive. "I'm on my way. Don't let that plane take off." 11 minutes later, Jonathan Turner strode into the terminal, his tailored suit and commanding presence turning heads. He spotted Caleb and immediately knelt to embrace him. "Are you okay, son?" Caleb nodded, though his eyes were still red. "I didn't do anything wrong." "Dad, I know," Jonathan said, standing and turning to Emily. "Let's fix this." Emily led them back to the gate, where Melissa was speaking with the captain. Jonathan walked straight onto the plane, Caleb by his side. The murmurs among passengers grew louder as they recognized the powerful CEO. Jonathan approached Melissa, his expression calm but cold. "Are you the flight attendant who removed my son from this plane?" Melissa blinked, taken aback. I didn't know he was your son, she stammered. That shouldn't matter. Jonathan replied firmly. You didn't bother to check his ticket. You humiliated a child in front of your passengers because of an assumption. Do you treat all customers this way, or just the ones who don't look like they belong in first class? Melissa flushed, her composure faltering. I thought he was trying to sneak in. You thought wrong, Jonathan interrupted. He turned to the captain. This plane isn't going anywhere until we resolve this. Jonathan turned to address the passengers, his voice carrying through the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the disruption, but this is a matter of principle. No one, especially a child, should be treated as though they don't belong simply because of their appearance. My son Caleb had every right to be here. This kind of behavior doesn't represent the values of Aero Sky Airlines, and it won't be tolerated. The passengers erupted into applause, many nodding in agreement. Jonathan faced Melissa again. You're relieved of your duties for this flight. I'll be discussing your employment status with HR. Melissa's face turned pale as she gathered her belongings and left the plane in silence. As the plane prepared for takeoff, Caleb returned to his seat, this time with his father sitting beside him. Passengers smiled at him reassuringly, offering words of encouragement. Are you okay now? Jonathan asked. Caleb nodded. Yeah, thanks for coming. Dad, always, Jonathan said, ruffling his son's hair. In the weeks that followed, Jonathan launched an internal investigation into Aero Sky training programs. Melissa's dismissal was announced, and the company implemented mandatory training on customer service and racial bias for all employees. Months later, Caleb sat in his father's office, flipping through designs for a new airline initiative aimed at making luxury travel more accessible to underserved communities. Dad, Caleb said, I want to help with this. I want to make sure no one else ever feels like they don't belong. Jonathan smiled, proud. You've already started doing that, Caleb, but let's keep building it together. As Caleb looked out the window at a jet soaring into the sky, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. What had started as a moment of humiliation had turned into a powerful lesson for him, his father, and the airline as a whole. Have you ever experienced or witnessed unfair treatment like Caleb did? Share your story in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring tales of justice and resilience.